We're
back! Scares ya. And we really are back, and back for good. The real Kid the Kid and Mr. E, reporting live for the Promised Land news station. We hope you didn't like those other two imposters too much, because you won't be seeing much of them again. Well, maybe we'll use one of them if we're sick.
true, but they will not be using our names again. They are lucky we don't have them arrested for imposteration.
Mr. E, that's not a word. But anyways, I wouldn't be too hard on them, as they were hired by our director.
Good point. And now that I think of it, it would be a good time to introduce the newest member of our crew. No longer the director, but now a reporter. The one, the only, the director's name. Milligram!
Seriously, Mr. E, you had to pause that long. Anyway, all you faithful followers out there may have realized that our director tried to get rid of us. Thank you to those who called us to alert us to her schemes. But we were too aware for her to trick us. But we have forgiven her, and we're good now. So instead of firing her, we have made her a reporter so that Mr. E and I can focus our work here in the studio while she travels around the Promised Land interviewing and gathering the news. Right, Millie Graham?
You got that right. I'm just glad to have a job. I don't know what got me into trying to get rid of you two. Our views almost plummeted.
That doesn't surprise me one bit. Right, Kid the Kid? Well, it's good to have you join the crew.
Folks, today we have some news for you on the nation we have been following for almost a month now. The nation of Israel, led by Joshua.
Yes, it has almost been a month. Wow. We've seen Joshua and Israel enter the Promised Land through the Jordan River as the waters divided on either side. We've seen them defeat Jericho as the walls around Jericho came crashing down. And last week you heard about their defeat of the city of Ai after they were defeated due to Achan's sin. And this week, our news gets no less dramatic as Israel is at it again with another people, not in battle. At this point, we do not know this people's name.
Yeah, but when I heard about these people and that they were going up to Israel, I thought for sure that they were going to get whacked by Israel in another battle, just like Jericho and Ai. But wow, I could not have been further from the truth. Israel got duked.
Yes, they did, and we sent Milligram to get the latest information on the situation with Israel. Take it away, Milligram.
Okay, here's what I found. Israel was approached by some people who claimed to be from a faraway country. They didn't give their names, but they showed up to Israel claiming they did not live in the Promised Land. They even showed up with their clothes looking pretty ragged and their food looking pretty old. They certainly seem to be from a faraway country, but I do have my doubts. Israel did question them, and the people held to their story that they were from a faraway country. Their clothes and food backed up their story, and they even shared how they had heard what God had done to the Egyptians and some of the other peoples Israel defeated. It kind of reminds me of Rahab and how she and her people heard about what God had done through Israel. Mr. E, Kid the Kid, people of the Promised Land, you might wonder, okay, what's the big deal with these people showing up to Israel? Well, as we said, they didn't want to fight. They wanted to have peace with Israel. They wanted Israel to agree to not attack them, and Israel agreed so that Israel and this people would not attack each other.
Very interesting. I wonder, who are these people?
Personally, I believe them. Their story sure sounds tight, and if they lived in the Promised Land, how could their clothes and food possibly get so old from a short trip?
Okay, you are right, Gid. Well, thanks, Milligram, for the report. Not as dramatic as I was expecting or hoping for, but hey, another development in the Israel story. Maybe the people of the Promised Land will follow these people's example and surrender to the Israelites. I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, that's all we have for today. Next time we join you, Millie Graham will be interviewing none other than Ricardo Rufus III to find out how the great market is doing. I guess we'll see you next time. I'm Get the Kid.
And I'm Mr. E, signing off.
And have we got some breaking news for you?
Yes, we do, Get the Kid. This is more like it. 3 days ago, I got to admit I was pretty disappointed that Israel made a truce with some random people group. And that's it. But boy, did we got some news for you. Take it away, Milligram.
Yes, I was tracking Israel, still thinking something seemed a bit fishy about this people that showed up to Israel, and I was right. This was not some faraway people, but these were people living in the Promised Land, people that Israel was supposed to defeat, people that instead Israel agreed to not attack. These people are the Gibeonites.
Gibeonites, huh? Who are the Gibeonites anyway?
I was getting there. The Gibeonites only lived a 3-day journey from where Israel had been staying. When Israel discovered Gibeon, they didn't attack, for they made a truce with them. But Israel had some pretty unhappy people among Israel, since Israel's leaders had agreed to not attack. They decided to make the Gibeonites their servants instead of killing them like they had killed the people of Jericho and Ai.
Man, did Gibeon trick Israel? They really poured a fast one on them.
You got that right. I can't believe they fell for it.
Yes, Israel was fooled. So instead of wiping out Gibeon like they were supposed to and had been doing, they kept these people alive, the Gibeonites. And I've got to tell you, these people, the Gibeonites, may have sought a truce with Israel, but I will report that I am hearing some rumors of other people gathering together and preparing to attack Israel. We are in for some messy days ahead. Well, that's all I've got. Millie Graham, signing off.
Thank you, Milligram. Exactly what we want. News to report. Right, Get the Kid?
You got that right, Mystery. And by the way, our report on Ricardo Rufus III has been canceled. So we are back to Randolphy.
You gotta be kidding me.
Dude, that's my cousin. Back off.
Okay. We'll talk about this later. Well, folks, that's all that we have today. This is Mr. E.
And I'm Get the Kid. Good day, everyone.
Well, that was quite the report from Mr. E and Gid the Kid. It was good to have them back with us, and I'm pretty glad that they forgave the director, or should I say, Millie Graham. Let's think about this news report. The information came right from our Bibles, right from the book of Joshua. The Gibeonites tricked Israel. They pretended to live far away when really they lived right there in the promised land where Israel was attacking, where they were seeking to conquer. So they tricked Israel, and Israel, we saw, believed them. I want to point out one thing in specific from this story of the Gibeonites showing up to Israel, and there they are showing up and pretending like they came from a long journey, how they showed up to Israel and Israel believed them. I want to point out one thing in specific that we learn from this story, and I want to point out one thing in specific from the chapter that this story is found in, Joshua chapter 9. And this week, you guys actually don't need to turn in your Bibles, as I have the one verse we're going to focus on, and that's Joshua 9, verse 14. Okay, follow along as I read what's up here on the screen. It says, "So the men took some of their provisions, but did not ask counsel from the Lord." All right, but did not ask counsel from the Lord. What this is saying is it's saying that Israel believed the Gibeonites, but they didn't ask for help from the Lord. They didn't ask for God's wisdom. They didn't ask what his take was on this situation. They didn't ask counsel from the Lord. So the Israelites believed the Gibeonites. They thought that they were telling the truth. The Israelites thought that they had this situation under control when really they didn't. Okay, and they should have asked God for help, but they failed to do so. So Israel should have looked to God to ask what they should do. Israel should have prayed and asked God for help in this situation. They should have asked, should we believe Gibeon? Israel should have valued God's wisdom and knowledge in this new circumstance. Israel should have remembered God in this situation, and we see they didn't, and they were tricked. Think about your own life. How often do you look to God for his help? How often when you are in a tough situation, do you ask God to help you? How often do you pray to God rather than trying to figure out things by yourself? Let me give you guys a few examples of how you can take what we learned from the Bible today, from this story of the Gibeonites tricking the Israelites. Let me give you a few examples of how you can take these things and really seek to live them out in your life, to do what we learn in this story. Here's a situation. Maybe you guys get pretty nervous to go to school. Maybe you actually get pretty scared to go to school. Pray to God and ask him to help you calm down, to help you trust him as you go to school. Maybe two of your friends are fighting and you're really not sure what you should do, what you should say to them, how you can get them to get along. Pray to God and ask him for help, that they would get along and that they would forgive each other. Maybe your family isn't getting along and they're fighting. Pray to God that he would help your family to get along, help them to have a better relationship, and even that you would be a good, godly example to them. Another example of how you could take what we learned from this story today is maybe you have friends that aren't Christians and you're not sure how much time you should spend around them. You're not sure even how you can be a good example to them. Pray and ask God that he would help you to know how to relate to your friends, that he would help you to resist living and acting and saying the things that your unbelieving friends say. I'll give you one more example. Say you get pretty nervous for a test or maybe even a sport that you play. Rather than just thinking about how you'll do on that test or the sport, or how much you've prepared for this test or for this sport, ask God for the help to do the best of your ability. So those are just a few examples of how you can take this story and really live it out in your life. How you can do what we learned today from Joshua chapter 9 and how the Israelites were tricked by the Gibeonites because they didn't ask God for his help. We need to look to God often in every situation and all throughout our days. In times when we're scared, in times when we're nervous, in times when we're really not sure what we should do. Talk to God and say, God, I need your help. Talk with him about the situation and ask God for his wisdom. Just like sometimes you might go to your parents and you might say, Mom, Dad, I need your help. Can you help me figure this out? Just like that, you can go to God and say, God, I need your help. Help me to figure this out. My question to you is, will you start doing this? I know for myself, as I studied and as I learned from Joshua chapter 9 from this story, I was challenged in how I need to be asking God for his help more, how I need to be praying to God in every situation for his help, for his wisdom. So that's our lesson for today. Joshua chapter 9, the Israelites being tricked by the Gibeonites. And we saw Mystery and Gid the Kid back at it again with Millie Graham. Next week, we will be continuing to learn from the book of Joshua. Hope you guys have a good week.